Well, being autistic is a very strong possibility I'm wrong about this. I think it's time we started engaging the dialogue about race. We who are accused of being racist as a default. And we are. Those of us who have had the right end of the stick, the benefit of the racist equation, have not been given permission to discuss the issue. Our feelings are not relevant because we have had the privilege. Our thoughts on it are expected to echo only what we're taught to say about it from the victims. That the victim's story is the only relevant story or opinion in the issue. I understand that. And I have stepped back from the conversation because of it. But I don't think the conversation is continuing to be healthy and healing anymore. I'm feeling as though it's time to stop biting my tongue because I'm white. I get it. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of water under that bridge. And I have benefited from the entire river current. I get that too. I also have had, in my own milieu, my own experience, I've had a life that I don't like telling people about. So suffice it to say, I know what it feels like to feel crappy about your life, get kicked a lot, to be on the wrong end of social disorder. You don't have to have colored hair. And I've gotten it from people who do have dark colored hair and skin. I confess I am a blonde. I've had a lot of negativity thrown at me for having blonde hair. And when my hair is dyed colors so that I don't look like a blonde, I can see the contrast. And I'm pleased to say that in the last 5 years or so, more people are returning my smile on the street than used to. It used to be a very specific demographic who would smile back, and the rest, or maybe it was more a specific demographic that didn't smile back. People who didn't used to smile back at me on the street were First Nations people, and not all of them. Just the ones that looked, I don't know, there were times when even the ones that looked healthy and happy would frown when I caught their eye. And it was an interesting thing. But then I get that from white people too, because of the shaving and the tattoos, you know. So it's really hard to say if they were frowning at me because I was white or because I'm a punk, I guess. There was a period of time, though, when I couldn't seem to catch a First Nation's eye in a smile. It was a strange thing. And perhaps that was, a function of the political climate at the time. We were building up towards the Truth and Reconciliation period, which is still ongoing but reached a fever pitch. It was also not long after the news broke about how horribly the police were behaving with First Nations people. They were dropping people off in the cold outside of town to walk back inadequately dressed simply because they were drunk. And there was this prevailing idea that First Nations people somehow were better able to tolerate exposure and weather, and that made it okay. And nobody's ever done any scientific testing to determine whether races have different responses to climate. It's too fraught with ethics. It's an interesting question that we are not going to find out anytime soon. Because it suggests that what those cops did had some kind of okayness about it. And You don't have to discuss whether or not they were going to survive the experience to discuss what was wrong with it. There's no question that it was wrong emotionally. And we're not paying enough attention to the emotional impact of our behavior when we deal with each other. This started out as wanting to talk about the white side of racism. I had been listening to a Japanese fellow who's making some pretty frank and infuriating conversations on the topic. And I hear a lot of honesty in his words. I hear a lot of provocation as well. But I do recognize that he's speaking from the heart. And he's trying to communicate his point of view and his opinion. And he's trying to do it as reasonably as he can. He's not trying to promote hate. He's trying to say, stop letting your race determine who you are. And he's saying that to the people who aren't Japanese. It's ironic because being Japanese is very important to Japanese people. And he would just as readily start saying, start being proud of the race that you are. Start finding the assets in your heritage and maximizing on them. And he would say it in such a way as to offend everyone. He would probably try to delineate what those things are in any given person. And here's the thing, every last one of us is the exception. They say the exception proves the rule, but at the same time, when it comes to human nature, we can talk in similarities and we can talk in dissimilarities, and we can never, ever pin two people down to a prediction. You cannot even pin two twins down and say they will be capable of X, Y, Z, or this, that, or the other thing can, will, or might happen to them. You simply can't. The X factor, well, I don't like to use that. It used to be my favorite word for that unknown quantity. I know that some other language has a word for that English doesn't. But it's that part where you have to admit that you can't see everything that's going to happen in the future. That unknown. That, like a lottery or a lightning strike, can come so far off kilter that you never saw it happening. I don't know how many authors have used that as a hook for their novels. But it's a truth in life too. We all know somebody that defies logic. We all have had events in our lives that defy logic and reason. It simply isn't, life isn't something you can reason with that way. It's not something you can predict. Even when you have psychic powers, you can't fully predict it, because all a psychic sees is one or, hopefully more than one of the possible futures. They can say, well, you're standing here, and these are the routes in front of you. But they can't see whether that person chooses to cross the trackless wilderness. They can't decide which of these possibilities, whether that person stands there and holds still, whether they do a complete 180 and head backwards, or a 90-degree straight off to the side. The psychic cannot determine with 100% accuracy what choices the person sitting in front of them will make, especially after having heard the reading. The psychic rather looks at that person's personality and their tendencies and their history and the choices that are in front of them, and tries to help that person make the best choice. That's what a psychic should be doing. Of course, most psychics, you go to the psychic fair, they're there to make money, not to play psychologist. They're not there to guide and counsel you as much as you think, because there's not as much money in it. The money, when you're doing psychic fairs, is actually in flattering and encouraging your client. Your client has to feel like they have a little bit of something they're supposed to fix. It's supposed to be something easy. They have to feel like their dear departed loved ones are standing behind their shoulder, and they have to feel like the future is exciting. you can't sit there and go, well, I could see in your cards that if you haven't done it yet, you have a desire to do this. And I'm not going to come up with an example of something actual, but think of something foul and horrible. And you must not do that, or you're going to wind up suffering. You can't do something like that. Even if the person in front of you maybe is a pedophile, and you're psychically aware of it, you're not going to make any money off them if you call them out. Even though that might be the thing most screamingly needed to be said, you're not going to make any money. You would be a psychic like me. Now, I didn't run into any pedophiles, but I did run into a lot of people who were mindlessly wasting their lives, and I didn't say it to them that way. I said, you have this obstacle here marked by this card. It involves this to overcome, but I wasn't telling them about boyfriends and nice cars and lottery wins and fancy houses and exciting things in the future and, trips to Mexico. I really should have paid someone to give me a reading sometime, but you can't read me like a normal human, so it wouldn't have worked. This rant has gone so far off the scale. Here's the thing about race. I stay away from people of a different race. In general, I don't want to. I want to engage them. They fascinate me. I want to learn more about what black skin looks like in its different shades and tones, and when it's clean and when it's dirty and when it's healthy and when it's sick. I want to know it familiarly like I do white skin. I want to feel that way about different textured hairs. I want to understand the point of view that somebody from a different family feels. And what does it feel like when you're walking around being this other type? I want to know these things. I want to hear it from their voices. But I can't get there. When I think about trying to socialize with people of color, a flood of touchy people comes to memory. I remember the number of times I have inadvertently said something I did not mean to say, but was taken for the wrong meaning. And the main word that comes to mind when I think of colored people, and there's where my racism is, I assume they're going to be touchy with me. Now, I assume everybody's likely to be touchy with me in general, but more so people who aren't from the same background as me. The one where I was raised, the one that I intimately understand the motivations and the points of view. Those folks, I feel like I know how not to offend them. I still do. But colored folks of all colors, most especially the ones who are in a state of healing from oppression. I can interact with people from the upper castes of India quite comfortably. They don't feel oppressed. They're not on the lookout for offense, and they don't give a damn about me anyway, because they actually are above me, but I'm beneath them. Which, you're always like, maybe this person doesn't have that, and then you find out the friendship was shallow all along. That's unfortunate. But in general, yeah, I find it easier to relate to other people of Northern European heritage. We have the commonalities, and I know how not to offend them. I would really like to be able to know more about people of other races, but I think I would have to go to their home countries where they feel more empowered to do that. I'm hoping that the fresh crops of refugees will somehow break some of that ice and give me that opportunity to connect with people from exotic locales. But I don't connect with people in general, and I don't know if folks from exotic locales will be more than just curiosity, interest for me, or will actually become people I've got deep connections with. Wish I had the chance to find out. But it really isn't as simple as walking up to them on the street saying hi. It's really not. The way you stand or what you're wearing might be so offensive to them. A whole lot of these people are extremely Christian. You got to understand, there isn't a Christian out there that I haven't offended to some degree, simply with my appearance and my nature. I'm a transgender. I mean, that is so offensive. to conservative people. It's over the top offensive, and a lot of the new refugees are conservative people. Yes, friends, there's that too. We all have that in our population. So, and some countries are more so than others. And a lot of the countries from which these people are coming have extremely strong Christian values or extremely strong Muslim values. And the two religions are remarkably similar. They come from Moses. They both come from Moses. That's where they split, I guess. Although Muhammad came 200 or 500 years after Christ. Really ought to look that up. I mean, it's a pretty simple, it's whatever year AD, that's how many years after Christ. Anyways, same religion, folks, actually. It's crazy. It's crazy they fight. Okay. I'm really rambling, and I'm gonna just upload this raw. So, back to my dishes. Yeah, this was a dishes rant. I stopped instead of doing the dishes while I ranted.